Okay, well, that wasn't supposed to be broken into two videos, but my puppy had a little meltdown just as I was talking last time, so let's continue where we left off. Okay, where were we? Yes. Bojack Horseman opening with the description of horsing around is a very shallow show about good people who like each other, and just a show that makes you feel good is very ironic as an opening for this show itself, Bojack Horseman, because Bojack Horseman, this show, is really completely the opposite of horsing around, right? It's a deeply layered, hard to watch, painful show about complicated people who often don't like each other and are not at all clearly good a lot of the time. So he's using the description of horsing around as a kind of a juxtaposition for the show that we're about to see. I think his relationship to horsing around throughout the series is really interesting. Think about what comes off just as a kind of a gag, namely the fact that he needs to be watching horsing around to come in bed. He needs that validation. And at one point he gets caught having an orgasm while horsing around is playing. And he shouts out, "It's not what you think." And this is played as a comedy line because, of course, on the surface, it's exactly what you think. The person thinks that he's coming to the site of his own show, and that is, in fact, exactly what's happening. But in another sense, Bojack's right. It's not what you think, because the issue is not that he is sexually aroused by his former self, or at least that's not really the interesting reading, right? It's not that he's so in love with himself that he has to watch himself in order to get off. It's rather that he so desperately needs others to approve of him and recognize him that he doesn't even feel like he has a self unless he has that. So he has to have this beloved image of himself that people are laughing with and at and clapping for on in the background before he can like himself enough to take pleasure in himself and have an orgasm. I think that's what that obsession of his is really about. He needs that public image of himself, which is so beloved, to be there so that he can feel like a real person or horse who's worth liking. Otherwise, he's just not in a position where he could take pleasure in anything. This comes full circle at the very end of season 1, in the very, very last scene, where he's giving out autographs at the LA Observatory. And this is the location where, if you remember, Herb Kazaz told him earlier in the series that he was going to give him the part in Horsing Around. And when he tells him, this is a flashback to the 90s, he says, "I'm going to get you this part and we're going to do this show." He says to him, and it's a great quotation, he says, "You're going to be Bojack Goddamn Horseman." In other words, Herb is telling him he's going to become himself by becoming famous and having public recognition and approval, right? He only gets to be a self if other people tell him who he is and that he's great and that he's worthwhile. Otherwise, he feels purposeless and he feels like he's not anybody. And now at the end, 25 years later, he's getting that approval once again because Diane published a book about him. But again, Diane wrote the book and created a public image of him that isn't really him. And it's because that public image of him that somebody else created is getting lots of attention that he gets to be Bojack Horseman again and sign his name, like literally sign Bojack Horseman on things. Remember this very significant scene at the end of episode 11 of season 1. He panics and he shows up and he asks Diane in public whether he's a good person. He panics about what he is on the inside, apart from what others can see of him, apart from his fame and apart from his public persona. And he wants to know if he's a good person deep down. So he shows up and he says, "Is it too late for me? Am I doomed to be the person I am?" Right? This is a fundamental existentialist question. Does his past define him? Is he anything at all underneath what others can see? "I need you to tell me that I'm a good person," he says, despite all the bad things he's done. Underneath all that, deep down. That's what he says to her. "I need you to tell me that I'm a good person underneath all that, deep down." Now, if you think about it, there's two things significant about that. One is he's still looking to Diane to answer this for him. He doesn't feel capable of answering it himself. He needs someone else to tell him who he is. And in fact, he doesn't just ask Diane, he asks Diane using a microphone in front of a public audience. It couldn't be more public, right? So he's still, even in this scene when he claims to be trying to get to the bottom of what he is on the inside, he's still doing it through public perceptions of him. But the other thing that's really important about this scene is that she won't give it to him, right? And it's a very painful scene to watch because you're dying for her to say something nice to him, and she just won't. She just won't hand it to him. Why won't she hand it to him? Well, she tells him in episode 12. She says, I kind of don't believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is the things that you do. In other words, she's reminding him of that basic existentialist premise that we started with, right? You don't get to find meaning through some sort of real character that you have deep down on the inside that's waiting to come out. All you are is the self that you make out of yourself. All you are is what you do. There is no separate you on the inside. Right? This is one of our big existentialist themes, and Diane is telling it to him directly. And when you read Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals, the part that I told you to focus on, notice that Diane is using pretty much exactly Nietzsche's language there. She's just repeating Nietzsche's own claim, where he says, there is no being behind the doing, right? All there is the act. You'll find the passage. It's a very famous passage. Oh, actually, I have it here. I can read it to you. Nietzsche says, and just exactly as the people separate the lightning from the flash and interpret the latter as the thing done, as the working of a subject which is called lightning, so also does the popular morality separate strength from the expression of strength, as though behind the strong man there existed some indifferent neutral substratum which enjoyed a caprice and option as to whether or not it should express its strength. But there is no substratum. There is no being behind doing, working, becoming. The doer is a mere appendage to the action. The action is everything, right? So in popular morality, we say that somebody might be a good person on the inside, they just don't happen to be expressing it. But according to Nietzsche and existentialists, there is no being behind there, right? You are what you do and how you act. And that's exactly why Diane refuses to tell Bojack what he is on the inside, because there is no inside. We are our actions, but we create this fiction of a real self under there who is somehow better and more powerful than the self that gets expressed. And existentialists think that we create this fiction in order to make ourselves feel better, right? In order to take away some of our guilt and responsibility for actually acting well all the time, and to alleviate our responsibilities for building a good self for ourselves through actions. But this is not what Bojack wants to hear. And remember, when Bojack is playing Secretariat, his hero, yet another public role for him, he says, as Secretariat, I'm terrified of nothing. People see greatness in me and they mistake it for goodness. But I know that I'm nothing. This is a line that he's given, but it's also exactly what Diane tells him, and it's exactly what he's afraid to find out. So Bojack's big struggle then is, how can he get past needing other people and his public persona to give him his sense of self, given that he can't rely on some true inner self either? Okay, I'm going to pause there for a moment, and then we're going to go on to Diane.